Let me quote from Tucker Carlson, who is a Fox News Channel host, and I think one of the most influential conservative thinkers in the United States. I think someone who truly understands the nationalism, the populism, the America Firstism, and is a great communicator of it. He said this the other day. He said, for Dr. Tedros, that's the head of the World Health Organization, he's not a real medical doctor, by the way, and Bill Gates, the pandemic and climate change share a very different connection. Both are useful pretexts for mass social control. Both are essentially unsolvable crises they can harness to bypass democracy and force powerless populations to obey their commands. I think he's nailed it. And you'll notice that with the pandemic, which is statistically over, has been over since May, well, that doesn't mean that the government is done. The mask bylaws all started in August, even though the matter was over in May. Now vaccines are the next step, but now the UN is saying, well, even vaccines aren't the end of it. This is a perpetual crisis, just like that of global warming. And joining us now via Skype to talk about this is someone who I think was the first pandemic skeptic I ever spoke with. I'm talking about our friend Marc Morano, the boss of ClimateDepot.com. Great to see you again, Marc.
Thank you here, Ezra. Yeah, I didn't buy this thing from the beginning. I mean, obviously there was a virus, but the idea that lockdowns are necessary, I had known and saw firsthand what the CDC and the FDA even did when it comes to vaping. I actually followed your own public health in Canada. I mean, vaping, regardless of what you think it's safe or not, is clearly safer than tobacco smoke. But both Canada, the United States, heavily regulated it, used the scare of teen lung ailments to hype it, even though the teens were buying illegal black market vape devices. So I knew going into this that the CDC was caught just outrageously lying about that. But not only that, I followed the work of Michael Fomento for decades, and he's the one that called out the CDC and the myth of heterosexual AIDS, and actually the whole AIDS alleged epidemic at the time. Because if you look back, Fauci was one of the ones warning it was going to be spreading everywhere, and it was going to be this dangerous new thing. They weren't, in the early days. Their first instinct with the CDC is always the fear, because it generates the crisis situation, which gives them more power. So I never bought into this, and it's been just an insane fight. But I feel like we're losing it. Even with President Trump, we are losing this battle. Trump's still touting the Neil Ferguson discredited model that he saved millions of lives. President Trump still doesn't publicly get it.
Yeah, I think he's in a pickle because on the one hand, he wants to say, look, it was going to be this bad, but I saved you from that. Because if he doesn't say that, the Democrats will say, oh, we had 100,000 plus 180,000 deaths. So I think he has to play their game to rebut their rhetoric. But as we know from the global warming, if you grant the underlying premise, then you've lost already. I remember our first conversation. You were so bold. And I wasn't, because I think my misinformation came from a different place. I was extremely skeptical of global health experts, but I probably was oversampling news from dissident voices in China. I follow a great number of underground sources showing videos from China, and so I saw the extreme lockdown measures there. Something right out of well, now we see them in Victoria State in Australia, yeah. But I saw the extreme reaction in China. I had just watched the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, and I saw in March and early April the death toll, even in the West, climbing daily. And I thought, oh my God, maybe China has millions of deaths. And so I was dealing with Chinese misinformation, disinformation. You were looking at it from a CDC, World Health Organization point of view. I guess your skepticism was better than my skepticism.
Well, I mean, I think we all were, initially scared, especially with the propaganda coming out of China. They had video of people dropping dead in the streets. Yeah. They had people being welded into their homes. And then you had Fauci out there just on a scare campaign. And then the entire Trump, here's a key thing here. The entire Trump administration fell in line and gave Fauci daily briefings. Had this been a Democratic president when this happened, I think we would have had a lot more skepticism, because people, Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, people on the right would have stood up to a president who was essentially allowing the shutdown of the entire country. Yeah. And I think because it was Trump, I don't think people question it as much. They thought, well, if even Trump's convinced, this must be bad. So in a way, having Trump president may have worked against us here.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.